Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and today I want to talk about the topic of post-traumatic growth. So a sample of research was done quite a few years ago, and it was about people who reported sort of their experience of trauma. And research showed that about 30% of participants reported experiencing something characterized as post-traumatic growth, which is this idea or belief that people actually came out of that trauma and had some form of gratitude for it because they believe that that trauma shaped their lives in a really profound and powerful and impactful way. So maybe they became stronger from the trauma, or they felt that the trauma taught them a really important lesson about themselves that they had to connect with, or maybe they felt that that trauma shaped their life and made them let go of things that no longer served them so that they could move on to a better space. And a lot of people that I've personally seen and worked with tend to have this experience with things like cancer. As scary as that sounds, oftentimes people realize that, wow, I had this cancer and I learned to take care of myself. I learned how to set boundaries. I learned, I went and sought therapy, and I went and did emotional work with myself, took better care of my physical nutrition, did the things that I, had told myself, oh, I'll do one day when I retire. I actually started taking accountability for my life now. And so all of these instances often shape a person, and then maybe that person heals from cancer more often than not. And so let's say this experience happens, that person might reflect back on that experience, and that would be characterized as a form of post-traumatic growth, as long as the individual is consciously aware that the trauma actually had more positive or equal positive and negative at the end of the day. So it's not a dismissal of the negative and the challenge, because that would be a form of emotional repression, but it's a noticing that while there was challenge, there were also beautiful lessons and benefits and positive things that came out of this. And so this balanced perception, in my opinion, is really what promotes this sort of open-hearted approach to acceptance and surrender and appreciation and gratitude for a painful event. And so this would all sort of fall under the idea of post-traumatic growth. So the reason I want to talk about this today is because I've recognized in the work that I do with a lot of people that this is something we can intentionally create by allowing ourselves to see certain parts of an incident. And so, CBT has a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, has a lot of sort of principles in there. Like one of the primary principles is that our thoughts and beliefs about an incident are more impactful to a certain degree than the incident itself. Okay, so how we choose to look at the incident, what we choose to think and believe about the incident has a massive impact. And if you think about it, like when you think of the past, like a past incident that happened, it's no longer here. So the only way it remains is in your memory, which is really about how you've interpreted and stored an event. Okay, so really, truly, like your thoughts and beliefs and interpretations about an incident have a huge impact. And I would argue from, personal self-exploration and working with so many people that it always, pretty much always has a much more profound impact. So let's look at like what is trauma, and then what are the characteristics of people who experience post-traumatic growth, and how can we intentionally create some of these things for ourselves. And I'm not sitting here saying like use this process and you won't care about any trauma you ever have. Like this is just a perceptual shift, that whether it's something small that happens to you tomorrow, whether it's a traumatic event that happens in the next 20 years, or whether it's something that you're just trying to, shift your perception about and gain a little bit more healing and insight from about the past, you can use a little bit of these tools in this process to sort of boost your emotional capacity to work through an incident with. Okay, so first and foremost, a trauma is not necessarily something that's this huge, huge, terrible thing. A trauma is basically just something that you are not properly equipped with the tools to emotionally process. And so your nervous system sort of reorganizes itself around the event. Okay, and oftentimes these traumatic events that your nervous system's reorganized itself around will sort of pop up as triggers later on. So the way you've interpreted and stored that event will then impact what triggers you, maybe for the rest of your life, unless you've gone back and done work on that trauma. So I'm not going to get into all the details right now. But here are the key characteristics I found in individuals, and I mean like before they've dug deep into work, like client work therapy. People who tend to report post-traumatic growth with me when they're talking about their traumatic incidents before even working on them. These are the things that I found. Number one, each person, and I think period, for post-traumatic growth to occur, number one, we must express, acknowledge, and validate our feelings about the event. Okay, so for example, if somebody betrayed you in some way, let's say somebody stole all your money or a parent stole all your money, if we just say, oh, it's no big deal, and we try to just sort of say, I'm going to grow from this experience, if you don't get the first piece, you're automatically repressing the emotional component. So the first piece is, yes, that hurt. That I felt really betrayed, and I should feel really betrayed. I'm allowed to feel that way. My feelings are okay. They are valid. They are real. And your feelings, just on a side note, are real, true, valid neurochemical experiences. So literally, it doesn't matter if your feelings are about spilling the water bottle or if your feelings are about something really terrible that's on 10 out of 10 painful event that happened. You are always entitled to your feelings. If you try to ignore your feelings, repress your feelings, tell yourself that your feelings are not valid, that's all a form of disrespecting your emotional self, okay? So number one, the ability to acknowledge, accept, and validate your own emotions from the experience. And that's a really important first piece. It's sort of like compassionate listening to yourself in a way. The next piece I would say is to release any self-blame or guilting. Okay, so for post-traumatic growth to occur, there has to be an understanding of your perspective in the event and of your innocence in the event, as opposed to a judgment, a blame, or a guilting towards yourself. Okay, so what this really means is, like, let's say, for example, you get hit by a car while you're walking and you forgot to look both ways or something like that. Instead of like beating yourself up about it, which does no good, you would first acknowledge and validate and accept your emotions and make them okay. Yes, that was a painful thing. It was scary. It was difficult to recover. And where is my innocence in that? Like, instead of beating yourself up, maybe I was having a really busy day in my mind and I just wasn't focusing and I was rushing and I was trying to get somewhere on time, and that's innocent. Everybody's walked across the street sometimes and not properly looked from time to time. No, knock on wood, like, don't go do that. but that's happened. And so it's to recognize our part in it and to be sensitive and compassionate towards our mistakes. If there was a part of us that might have co-created that traumatic event, or that might be partially at fault in the co-creation of that event. And interestingly enough, that brings us to step 3, which is to take full responsibility for your thoughts, emotions, and self after the event. If there's this blaming, like anything we're blaming, we're giving our power to. We're basically saying, like, that thing has more power over how I feel in my life currently than I do. And if that thing is a traumatic event that happened 20 years ago, it's time to start taking your power back, okay? So the next piece is to take full responsibility for what's going on now, okay? And we all go through some form of trauma, whether it's just the way we were socialized and conditioned, whether it's that we had a parent that was so critical when we were very sensitive at a young age, whatever it might be. There's a lot of stuff from childhood that we couldn't emotionally process. And so we want to recognize that, yes, that was painful then. We want to validate, acknowledge, accept our feelings. We want to release any self-blame for that, and guilting for that. And we also want to recognize, even though that was painful and I couldn't control it then, what was happening to me, I can control how I choose to respond now and how I choose to see this event now, which brings us to the next step. And this next step is, and I find this to be one of the more important, I can't say more important because they're all very equally important in different ways, but this is a very important one, to actively look at how this event helped you to grow, helped you to learn, forced you to let go of things that no longer served, or how it had a positive impact or imprint on your life in some other way. Okay, and that's a really important one. And that really balances out that sort of perceptual pain that you might be carrying. So for example, I was speaking with somebody a couple days ago who was in a really bad car accident and broke all kinds of bones in her body, including her neck, and had to do 2.5 years of rehab, lost her job, like went through all these really intense things, but met her now husband at the rehab center that she was going to. And so, you know, we're not sitting here going like, oh my gosh, it's specifically because of that event that I met my husband, but it's the recognition that life has a path and a trajectory, and sometimes the things, you know, that are so painful and that we lose, we can get so focused on, so hyper focused on, but we are not necessarily looking at what we gain. And that's an important piece for us to start recognizing if we're looking to grow out of the pain that we've experienced. Okay, now if you do that piece at the expense of invalidating your emotions, you're just going to experience emotional repression, and that traumatic event's going to stay locked in your nervous system, and you're going to feel it in a whole bunch of other different ways and popping up in other different forms. Okay, so that's super important. And the last two pieces I would sort of put in here as patterns that I've seen for individuals who experience post-traumatic growth are, number one, not resisting the past, not still blaming and being in risk. I can't believe that happened to me. That shouldn't have happened. I mean, the past is the past. Like the moment, like let's say I'm driving and my tire's flat, the moment the tire is flat, it's now the past. So if I argue with the past, even if it's the immediate past from 5 seconds ago, it's a losing battle because I have no control there. So if I'm fighting or resisting or arguing with the past, I am consistently going to show up on the losing side. Okay, so don't resist it. And finally, having a good support system. Like, I think it's important, you know, we're wired for authenticity and individuality, but we're also wired for attachment. And so I find that it's really important that we have a good support system whenever we go through any kind of traumatic event. So there's a process that I specifically use in great detail and my team uses to sort of unlock and release emotionally stored trauma from the subconscious mind and the nervous system. And that's not what this is, just to be very clear. And I'm not saying like do this process at home and it'll cure and change everything. Definitely not saying that, but I'm saying those are the important pieces that I see consistently in individuals that experience post-traumatic growth. And those are very important pieces for you to recognize and practice if there's something that you're looking to shift your perception around, or maybe help a loved one to shift their perception around, or just trying to balance out your emotional state because of a past event, or looking to just prepare yourself for any future hurdles that could come your way. So I hope you got a lot of value out of this video. If you did, please like it, share it, subscribe to our channel, and please visit www.personaldevelopmentschool.com for upcoming online courses, for client sessions, for all kinds of cool offerings that we have. Thank you so much for watching.